Ooh, what's going on, fellow N7s? This is Sentinel N7 coming at you with another video. Today I just wanted to have a really chill, relaxed video about things that I personally want to see in the next Mass Effect. Now, of course, this is just a list of preferences, so you are obviously not obliged to like everything that I like or want everything that I want. These are just some things that I think the next Mass Effect could probably benefit from, or that I just think would be kind of cool to have in there. Before we get into the rest of the video, please feel free to like and comment what you think would be great in the next Mass Effect. I'm genuinely interested in hearing what the community would like to have in the next Mass Effect game. And of course, liking helps build the channel, so please give the video that quick thumbs up. So without further ado, let's get into it. So number 1, a few well-crafted worlds. Now, we've seen throughout the Mass Effect saga that BioWare has experimented with a lot of different styles of game. The first game did really well. There's a lot about it everyone liked. But throughout the game, you could always feel the sense of being boxed in a little bit, you know? You could go to uncharted worlds, but there was only a specific section of each world that you could actually explore. Every time you tried to step out of bounds, the game would just take you back. And the reason for this was that the original vision for the game was for it to have fully open world elements where everything would be computer generated, every single planet. But this never really panned out. The technology just would not cooperate. So they ended up just deciding to have multiple worlds, each with a small kind of sandbox that you could move and roam around with. And since the story was solid, this worked out just fine. So in the end, it turned out that having a slightly more linear story worked best. You can have a few large, well-designed worlds and then maybe a bunch of smaller, less well-designed worlds. And that setup seems to have worked really well for BioWare. When we get to Mass Effect 2 and 3, they did trim down a bit too much in my opinion, but it was still working. You had a few fairly large worlds to explore where each formed a fundamentally important part of the story, and that formula seems to have worked very well in Mass Effect. If you need even more evidence that going too open world is not really working for BioWare, you only need to look at Mass Effect Andromeda. Once again, they tried to do the whole broad, large scope open world thing, and again, it didn't work. In case you don't know, during the production of Mass Effect Andromeda, BioWare was hoping once again to create multiple procedurally generated worlds for the player to explore. And once again, it didn't quite work. These procedurally generated worlds just weren't quite up to BioWare's standards. In the end, they decided to cut back on the number of planets, going from several dozen to about a dozen, to the few that we got in Mass Effect Andromeda. I don't know if you're noticing a pattern. Every time BioWare has tried to make hundreds of large open world planets, it has kind of backfired. The worlds always seemed to be empty, devoid of anything interesting, and that forced them to go back to just developing a few well-crafted worlds with tons of interesting things instead of dozens of shallow worlds. I think BioWare should learn from its history and just focus on making slightly more linear stories with a few well-crafted worlds rather than hundreds and hundreds of worlds. So I think it's just best for them to focus on fewer well-designed worlds where each world is an important element of the story and follows some kind of linear story path, maybe with a few side quests and side stories here and there. Number 2, Andromeda or ME3 combat. Thanks to years of experimentation, BioWare has slowly learned what works for combat, and man, did they nail it in Mass Effect 3 and Mass Effect Andromeda. I frequently go back and play Mass Effect 3 and Mass Effect Andromeda just for their combat. Because if you want to play a style where you take cover and snipe people from afar, you can do that. If you want to be an aggressive sentinel that rushes your targets and shoots them down with a giant claymore, you can do that. If you want to zip around with a jump jet and fire torrents of bullets into your enemies, you can do that too. Even people who did not like Mass Effect Andromeda constantly keep saying that the combat was the best element of the game, probably the best in the entire Mass Effect series. And that's what I want them to capitalize on. Give us a game that has combat similar to that of either Mass Effect 3 or Mass Effect Andromeda and really lean into it.
I want to have as much fun in combat as Grunt bashing in heads.
Sorry about that. Number 3, politics. Yeah, some of you might laugh at me for this one. In real life, politics is nothing but a bore. But in Mass Effect, it's actually a very interesting element of the game. What I mean is, working with different people and factions is important in Mass Effect. Any decision you make might help one group but piss off another. This has always added spice to the stories of Mass Effect. And I like me some spice. Like, remember curing the genophage? That was a big political deal. The only reason you were doing this was to secure support from the Krogan. But then again, there was also Salarian support to consider. And there were so many branching options. Here's one path that I didn't take myself, but that I saw another player took. Apparently, if you allowed Rex to survive on Virmire, and he became clan chief, but then you betray him by secretly sabotaging the genophage cure, he realizes what you did and he fights you over it. He also withdraws all his support, of course, because no duh, you just doomed his entire race for the support of the Salarians in taking back Earth. I mean, wow, I wouldn't do it myself, but wow, chef's kiss for the fact that that option even exists. And that's more of the stuff that I want. I want alliances to really feel like alliances. I want ways to strategically broker deals between two different factions, or to take sides and fight to obliterate some other faction so that I can get a good deal on, I don't know, Element Zero or something. BioWare really hit it out of the park in Mass Effect 3 in that regard, and I'd like more. Yeah, so sue me. Or please don't. Number 4, a character-focused story. In the original trilogy, we had this big, overarching, grandiose story about fighting the Reapers, and that was great and all. But I think it would be really good for Mass Effect to kind of go further inward rather than creating some larger galactic threat. It may be time for a more character-focused story. I'm gonna branch out a little from gaming here for my next example, but have you guys seen Guardians of the Galaxy 3? In the MCU, there's always this big bad out to either destroy the world or the entire universe or something. But we've seen how doing that all the time can kind of get tiring. We know that the universe isn't going to end. We know that the world isn't going to end, so the threat doesn't really feel real anymore. So I was pleasantly surprised when I watched Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and it was really just a story about a family or group of friends trying to navigate the already wonderful, rich, interesting galaxy to save each other. It was a really fresh breath of air to see these characters just trying to live their best lives. I think Mass Effect could benefit from something like this. We can have a galactic threat or something, but let's just leave that in the background. The main focus will be the characters and some smaller scale threat as they navigate this new post-Reaper galaxy. Number 5. Bring back the Mako. Yeah, I don't really have a good reason for this one. I just like the Mako. Especially in the Legendary Edition where they really revamped it up. It was great to just roam around in the Mako again. blasting Geth and seeing them roast. And I mean, the Nomad was nice, but you couldn't shoot with it. It was more like a giant space car or something, whereas the Mako was a tank, and boy did I enjoy riding it. Oh wait, that came out wrong. Anyway, number 6, bring back the Paragon Renegade system. In Mass Effect Andromeda, BioWare tried to experiment with a new tone system, ditching the old Paragon Renegade system, and I personally didn't really like it. I admire that they experimented, but it just didn't turn out very well. It felt like Ryder was just this wet tissue of a person. Okay, maybe that's a little harsh, but you know what I mean. Like, they didn't really have their own solid character, and all the tonal options just felt more or less the same. Just a weak meh feel to everything. I think they should bring back the Paragon and Renegade system. You know, I like having the option to play a badass who's out to complete their mission at any cost. Damn anyone who gets in their way. Or a Paragon who likes to resolve issues with diplomacy or tactics before jumping to violence. The almighty Lolly had a really good video on this. He proposed having a kind of 3-pronged system rather than just the 2-pronged system that the trilogy normally has. A charisma route, Boy Scout route, and an aggressive route, where the charisma route is kind of like the Paragon route. You appeal to people's morality, a sense of justice and honor. Or the Boy Scout route, you use information, logic, and tactics to get what you want. Or the aggressive route, where you get what you want through underhanded, callous, or even brutal means. And yeah, I think this would be pretty cool. Mass Effect originally kind of had something like this. You usually had 3 options. A Paragon option at the top, a Renegade option at the bottom, and a kind of middle option. But that middle option was always neutral. It was never really aimed at anything, and this always made it boring, which is why most people rarely ever choose that option. This system would kind of make that middle option important. It would actually do something, and giving the game just overall a more RPG feel to it. Maybe in one outcome, taking a more intelligent route is the way to go. You can't just brute force your way through the problem. Or another time where you can't talk your way out of this problem. You need to fight or play dirty to win. It's stuff like that that makes RPGs great, and I think it could really work well in Mass Effect. Which brings me to my next point. Number 7. Impactful choices. The mark of any good RPG are the choices you can make and the impact that they have. The instant I play an RPG and it starts to feel like my choices don't matter is the instant you lose me. After all, that's the main element to any RPG, the role-playing. Every choice you make has to feel like it has some degree of weight to it. And this isn't limited to dialogue choices. Everything from the background I choose to, heck, even my class should feel like it's some kind of important decision. Even if not for the world, but for me personally. That to me is what makes RPGs interesting, when you need to think before you act. And this isn't to say every choice needs to be some major event. Even minor choices can feel impactful or important. I remember in the first Mass Effect game, coming across a couple who were debating whether or not to give their unborn child a genetic modification. I knew this wasn't going to impact the galaxy, but damn, it really felt like a big decision at the time. That's where BioWare storytelling shines. In literature, there's this idea of Chekhov's gun. Basically, as I understand it, it means that if you add foreshadowing for something in a movie or a game, you need to pay it off at some point. It might not be right now, but somewhere down the line you need to show the repercussions. Otherwise, whatever you were doing becomes unnecessary, unimportant, or irrelevant. Some of the best times I've had in Mass Effect were when I made a choice and then I got to see the repercussions of the choice I made. Or when I replayed the game with different choices and then got to see how it changed the outcomes. And I pray that the next Mass Effect gives us these impactful choices. Number 8. New species. I think I kind of mentioned this in my previous video, reasons we should go back to Andromeda. One of the things that kind of bummed me out about Andromeda is that we didn't get a lot of new sentient species. But hey, there's still potential. I'm hoping the next Mass Effect will introduce us to some more interesting races that we never got to see, or that we just heard of but never interacted with. Yeah, there's not much else to say on this point. Give me new species, BioWare. Number 9. Our old crew. Okay, this title is a little misleading. It's not so much that I want our old crew members right back in the game like normal. I think their stories have been told, and it's kind of time to let them rest and retire, so to speak. But even if they don't bring back the old crew, what I'd really like more than anything is just to know what happened to them. Did Tali manage to build that house on her homeworld? What does Garrus do now? Does Garrus become a Primarch? Or maybe a high-ranking government official? I'd just like to know. I'd like to go to the Presidium and see murals or statues of our old crew, the saviors of the galaxy. I'd like to go to Tuchanka and hear the exploits of Urdnot Rex, the great leader of the Krogan. Just some sign to know of whether or not our crew lived well in their final days. So I don't care if they fast forward 600 years into the future and most of our crew is already gone. Just so long as they give us some kind of closure. Number 10. For it to be good. Yeah, I kind of just put this last one in so that I could have a top 10 list. But hear me out. Mass Effect is a franchise we all love. But it's no secret that the past few games have had issues. Andromeda came out with a bunch of bugs and its story was lackluster. Mass Effect 3 also had some story issues, but it was really the ending that killed it for a lot of people. And it's no secret that BioWare is just kind of struggling right now. So more than anything, I just want the game to be good. If I don't get a lot of the things that I've requested in this list, but the game is good, I think I wouldn't mind that. Sometimes media needs to surprise you and give you something you didn't even think you wanted. And I'm totally open to that. So BioWare, take your time. Get whatever it is you need to get. Let's make Mass Effect great again. Actually, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. But anyway, what do you guys think of my list? What are some of the things that you guys want in the next Mass Effect? Heck, what are some of the things you don't want in the next Mass Effect? Leave a comment below. Like and subscribe. You know you want to. But until next time, see you in space, cowgirl.